Hello, everyone, and welcome to the summary video of the session 7 of the Program Management Professional Certification Exam. The full recording of the session is available on the projectcompanion.com. So in this session, we covered actually the program lifecycle pool. There were many practice questions about each different type of activity in a program lifecycle. Okay. We've covered basically the three major phases of a program lifecycle: the program definition phase with its sub-phases of program formulation and program planning, the program delivery phase, with component authorization, oversight and integration of the components, and then the transition of the components output and closure of the components. And then also the program closure, okay, transitioning the program benefits, supporting the program closeout, and also archiving the appropriate artifacts of the program. Okay, so we need to make sure in this session that the students understand the difference between the program lifecycle and the project lifecycle, where the program lifecycle focuses on benefits, the project lifecycle focuses on deliverables. The program lifecycle focuses on or spans over multiple components, but the project lifecycle, it manages only the project's lifecycle. For alignment, the program lifecycle is aligned to strategy. For project lifecycle, it focuses on people, on scope, on schedule, on quality. For the lifecycle, the program lifecycle has got 3 phases. The project lifecycle has got usually 5 phases. And usually the program lifecycle delivers value continuously through the benefit sustainment. The project lifecycle ends when the deliverable is complete, even though usually the deliverables, they should provide value. Then we reminded the students of the mapping lifecycle, the mapping of the different activities to the phases. Okay, for these supporting and core activities like integration management, change management, communications management, financial management, and information management, procurement management, quality management, resource management, risk management, schedule management, and cost management. How, what kind of activities that happen in each program phase. Okay, then we deep dived into the program definition. We went on explaining again the key activities in the formulation phase. When starting a program, touched on business case again, program charter again, official process for kicking off a program. Then, we went on also to cover the sub phase of planning. So, planning for the costs, planning for the communications, for the changes, for the financials, establishment and planning for the information, for the procurement, for the quality, resources, risk, schedule, and scope. So all of that planning, as seen here in the mapping table. And then we went on to the biggest phase in the program, which is the delivery phase. Okay, here where the components are initiated, teams are coordinated, interdependencies between components and other sub-programs is managed, performance is monitored, risks and issues are managed, as well as changes, stakeholder engagement and governance, benefits are tracked, and transition to operations of the benefits or the components output happens. All right. Then we went into each activity in the delivery phase. We talked about the program integration management, how to utilize resources, knowledge, and skills so we can deploy multiple components across the program lifecycle. All right. Then, the program delivery, to oversight, integrate, and optimize the different parts of the delivery, the capabilities and benefits. Then also, we had a look at the different activities that happen during the delivery phase. Okay, executing changes, communications, financials, information, procurement. Again, all of those core and supporting activities. Then, how to manage the program performance. We covered that also. How to continuously monitor the performance, make the right forecasts, report on performance, and manage strategic level change and align with governance framework. Then also the other activity to sustain the benefits, transition the program once the components are complete. All right, so the stewardship continues to sustain the benefits. Where stewardship may transfer the benefits to other organization, other entities, or other subsequent programs. Okay, to organizations. How the transition happens. Then we covered also change management in a program, how to handle them, how what's the difference between change management in a program compared to a project. The change management process where we start from it's very similar to project management, having program change request, assess the log it in a change log, then assess it, analyze it, understand the impact of that change on the program or the components, interdependencies, on the constraints as well, etc. Then take a decision on the change, whether it will be approved or disapproved. Okay, who's got the authority to take approval on what type of change, what kind of changes the program manager can approve, then what kind of changes the program steering committee can approve, and what kind of changes the sponsor should approve. Okay, we talked also about the program communications management. What are the different types of communications? That was very important. With whom to communicate, how often to communicate. Then we have, this is the only question I kept from session 7, because it's so important to understand, all of these documents and all of these artifacts and how, in which phase do they happen. All right. So, for example, the program charter, that happens in the definition phase, component authorization, that's in the delivery phase, program closeout in the closure phase, program roadmap, that's in the definition phase, program business case, that's in the definition phase, and finally benefits transition, that's in the closing phase. Okay, it's so important to remember this. This is a very important question. Okay, how to authorize components, whether it's projects, sub-programs, other type of work. All right, what are the authorization criteria for a component, how to plan for a component, component business case, program manager role. That all is important. We covered that. Okay, then for the component oversight and integration, to how to execute the component, how to report on performance of the component, integration management, coordinating the efforts, to initiate whether new components or consolidate the integration of multiple outputs, and the progressive elaboration. All right. So not all the components are known at the program start. So the program manager uses progressive elaboration to adapt as program evolves. Then component transition and closure. Transferring the different outputs, deliverables of a component. Update the roadmap. We will see the roadmap in a moment. Closing criteria for the components to be defined, and then the component closeout, archiving lessons learned, or transferring lessons learned, archiving documentation, releasing resources, etc. Then program financial management, how to establish, manage the financials, funding, tracking the funding, monitoring, business case, identifying budget, change factors, manage payments, close component budgets, update the baseline and rebaseline the budget in case of any changes, forecast and communicate, regular financial forecasts, regular financial reports, and update the program management plan if necessary. Of course, these are just the key slides. We've covered several other slides in the session. You have here also the information management as an activity in the delivery phase. Okay, so to exchange information with the steering committee, with the portfolio management, with the program management. Then you have the information repository where you organize the information, you store securely, collect, receive data to analyze them, verify the accuracy and timeliness of the data. So here you communicate a lot with the program stakeholders, the component management, like the project managers, distribute the information, provide program reporting, support program management and archiving. All of that is important, for the information management. So important. The program is huge usually, program is big usually, so it requires an intensive knowledge of information management from the program management team or the program manager. That includes lessons learned, okay, and lessons learned register similar to projects, where we document the knowledge gained, um, what lessons we learned, which, how we resolve the issues. Um, so all of that is really important. So here we have the lessons learned register is reviewed when we are updating the stakeholder register, benefits register, the risk register, the master schedule of the program, the communications management plan, etc. All right. So uh, it is usually also updated when a component is closed and also at the end of the program, but there should be also other occasions when to update the lessons learned register. Then also in the program you can have procurement. It's very similar also to the project. So selecting sellers, negotiating contracts, conducting purchase agreements, formalizing proposals, setting up evaluation criteria for selecting vendors, etc., etc. Okay, that is very important. Procurement can be handled, on a program level, but at the same time, it can be, handled on a component level. So maybe, contracting with a vendor, that contract on a program level can be, applied to all the components, but then maybe each component will have its own contracting approach and preferences. Okay, that can happen as well. Then we talked about also we went through the program quality management. Okay, and the importance of assuring quality and controlling quality. So quality assurance, that's when we define quality policies, standards, and specifications to be followed in the program. Apply continuous monitoring and analysis. Perform quality audits. That's really important. Have some, check for any regulatory updates to be sure that we're compliant. In case of any changes on quality, then the program management team, they implement all the required quality changes. The purpose is to meet the customer expectations. Okay, then we can have, and then there is the quality control. Where components and deliverables are being monitored to check if they meet the quality requirements. Quality plans also are implemented. There are ongoing quality reviews. The results from the program are continuously assessed, evaluated on a product service level, deliverables level, and then the end-to-end satisfaction is measured. Okay. The same, also we went through the resource management on a program where the program manager coordinates and prioritizes resources. So there is an ongoing oversight, adaptation of resources depending on the needs of the program. Then, ensuring benefits delivery. Then, in case of any limited or scarce resources, especially in case of dependencies between the components, then resources must be or resource planning should be optimized. Resources should be prioritized to focus always on the highest value items, make some trade-offs sometimes, and allocate to what matters. All right. There is also a human resource planning. All right, to identify the roles and skills needed, document the roles and responsibilities, assign individuals or groups to their appropriate work packages, and empower the teams to deliver what they're supposed to deliver. All right, so resources should be really prioritized. That's an important point. We discussed in program management, we focused on since resources need, the resource needs change during the program delivery, whether it's related to staff or facilities, equipments, or any other type of resources. So there should be a program resource management plan, all right, to prioritize decisions, follow the guidelines, adapt if there are any changes, right? So these are examples of components and what kind of and the resources to be managed on a component level, and always control the schedule for any scarce resources. For example, some experts which are not so many or not so available, so they have to be shared among the components. So that should be planned carefully. Then also we just discussed in this session the risk management, since the program manager is accountable for managing the program risks, enabling benefits delivery. So there should be continuous risk management, continuously updating the risk register, prioritizing risks, analyzing risks, monitoring risks, preparing risk responses, checking if risks are on a program level, like an overall program risk or a component specific risk or any individual risks affecting any other parts of the program. Okay, so it's very important to also establish the contingency reserves on a program level. All right, and then of course each component will have its own contingency reserve as well. Then we covered also schedule management. We talked about the program master schedule, where there is the you see, here's an example, where there is the component overall duration. That's called the program master schedule, right? So here on schedule management, uh, we track the start and finish of the high level activities and milestones in the program, monitor actual progress against the planned timeline, maintain an accurate and up-to-date master schedule. Then also, adapt with changes in case, always the program master schedule should be updated. Also, check the changes and their impact on component schedules. And in case there are any changes coming from the component itself, also the master schedule should be updated in case that change impacts the other components. In case of adding any new components or removing components when a change is approved, the master schedule also should be updated. Okay. There should be also tight coordination with other program activities in case of any schedule variances, in case of any corrective actions are needed. All right. So, and then control the schedule itself in case of any slippage that happens often, to be honest. How to accelerate delivery, how to accelerate or decelerate components to achieve the program goals and expected benefits. Review the component level changes for any impacts on the other components, and make early deliveries to create, in case that creates some opportunities. Also, risks should be managed which are related to schedule in case of any risk of slippage or delays. And then, in case of any significant changes, the overall program plans should be revised. And in case of deviations, there should be some preventive actions to be taken. Okay. So the output of the schedule management is to have an updated program master schedule, updated the program roadmap, and identified program risks. This is an example of a program roadmap. You can see here we have different periods in the program. We have different components. So which component will be executed in which period? What is the relationship between the components, etc. This is called the a program roadmap. Okay, and there should be some decision points, after each part, so we can, the program steering committee and the program sponsor can decide whether the program should continue or not. And finally, and last but not least, actually, we went through the scope management of a program, where there are, what we went through the sources of scope changes, if the changes come from stakeholders or the components within the program, various reasons for changes, and then to have a scope management plan aligned with the change management plan as well. So capturing the requested scope changes, then evaluating each requested change, then deciding on the change, communicating the result of the change, and then recording the change. All right. So whenever there is a change, whenever there is an impact on scope, we need to determine the affected components, which were affected by the approved change, scope change, Maybe we can remove some components. Maybe we can add some new components. Update the program WBS, the program work breakdown structure to reflect the approved scope change. All right. WBS on a program level is similar to WBS on a project level, but then it's not actually deliverables oriented or work oriented, it's components oriented. Okay. And then manage scope at the allocated level. All right. So the program managers, they manage scope only to the allocated level, and they don't get into the scope changes within the components. And then we went on to the program closure phase, the last phase, all right, where we talked about the risk transition, transferring the remaining risks to the organization, resource transition, procurement closure, information archiving, financial closure, and then the program closeout with the final report, the formal acceptance, and the lessons learned. All right. Um, and then we went a little bit in more details about the closure conditions, governance authorization, final program report content, program activities integrated by phase. All right. So all of these activities, the core and the supportive ones, where do they exist in the phases? So they mostly exist in definition and delivery, but change, quality, schedule, and scope, they don't exist in closure phase. And then finally, key terminologies, and then we had the chapter test as well. All right. And I also explained a little bit the relationships, of between the different domains and the life cycle domain, since it's the biggest domain. So we said that in the PgMP exam, the questions would be cross domain, so you can expect to have questions talking about life cycle and governance, life cycle and strategy alignment, life cycle and stakeholder engagements, life cycle and benefits realization. That's so common. All right. So thank you. You can watch the full recording of the session on theprojectcompany.com.